Good evening. I call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining us tonight from your home. We are following the governor's state of emergency orders and streaming tonight's meeting virtually. All board members, staff members, and applicants are participating remotely. While this is a public meeting, please be aware that this is not a public hearing. Just as was the case for the in-person planning and zoning board meetings, there is no opportunity for the public to speak during this meeting. If you have comments about any of the cases, you are encouraged to reach out to the staff case manager or the applicant by email or phone. You may reach out to our board members through email or by phone, or during the public speaks out portion of any regularly scheduled town council meeting. Because we are meeting remotely, I'll be calling on each member individually to confirm their attendance at this meeting. All motions, seconds, and votes will be verbally obtained. The first item on our agenda is the roll call. I will call on each of you to state if you are present. And we'll start with Don Hamilton.
I'm present.
Nicole Samuel.
Present.
Chuck Montgomery.
Present.
Dan McFarland.
Present.
Steve Crutchfield.
Present.
Jessica Pearson. Oh, continue on. John Sorrell. And then we'll continue to myself. I'm here. Second item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda. This is Dan McFarland.
McFarland is a motion. Do I have a second?
Second. Montgomery.
Montgomery is the second. So I'll call on each of you to state your vote. Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
Ms. Samuel.
Aye.
Mr. Montgomery.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Crutchfield.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Is there a motion to adopt the August 24th meeting minutes?
So moved.
I think there's Mr. Crutchfield. Do we have a second?
I second.
Mr. Hamilton has the second. I'll call on each of you to state your vote. Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
Ms. Samuel.
Aye.
Mr. Montgomery.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Crutchfield.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. The board has one rezoning case for this evening, and the Planning and Zoning Board's annual report to discuss. We will start with the rezoning case 19 REZ 31, the Cornerstone Mixed Use Plan Amendment rezoning. And Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will present the staff report, and then she will introduce the applicant, who is also present. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you, Chairman Eads. This is a request for an amendment to the zoning for approximately 1.8 acres located at 1744 High House Road. The request would rezone the property to mixed-use district with an associated preliminary development plan to allow a proposed bank to have a drive-up ATM. The property is located in the northeast corner of the intersection of Magnus Drive and High House Road. It's an outparcel of the Bradford development and is currently undeveloped. And it's adjacent to the Muirfield residential neighborhood located north and east of the subject property. The base zoning is residential 40, and the property is located within a mixed-use overlay district. The zoning is also governed by a mixed-use sketch plan that was approved in 2007. One of the conditions of the associated mixed-use sketch plan limited the use to a maximum of 3 drive-throughs. Currently, the permitted uses for the subject property allow up to 6,000 square feet of commercial or office use, but would not allow an additional drive-through use. Because the applicant wishes to construct a bank with a drive-through ATM on the subject property, it's necessary for them to rezone to mixed-use district, MXD. With that zoning, they've submitted a preliminary development plan that would allow 3,500 square feet of bank use. They've also proposed certain modifications a 30% increase in the parking rate, a variable width streetscape along Magnus Drive, and they've asked that the front of the building be oriented so that it face into the parking area and not face the intersection. Cary's most recent GIS maps do not indicate the presence of any stream buffers or floodplains on the subject property, and field determination of such features will be required at the time of development plan review. There's an existing street side trail adjacent to Magnus Drive along the property frontage. And the property fronts Magnus Drive, a collector avenue, and High House Road, a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare. There's a Go Cary fixed transit route which operates along High House Road. And the Imagine Cary Future Growth Framework Map identifies the site as commercial mixed-use center, where predominant uses include commercial, shopping center, personal services, and multifamily use. A neighborhood meeting was held at Town Hall on February 5th of this year. There was only one nearby property owner in attendance who simply had general questions about the request, but did not voice any concerns or opposition to the request. And to date, staff has not received any emails or calls about this case. A remote public hearing was held on August 20th. There were no speakers at the hearing, and there were no written comments received. Following the public hearing, council members noted that they did not have any issues with the proposed bank or the drive-through. However, they did express concern about whether they would have sides or the back of the building facing streets. And they indicated a preference for placement such that the front door faced the street rather than having the appearance of the back of a building. And they asked the applicant to consider whether or not this was an option. So staff discussed this with the applicant, who noted the location of a large retaining wall at the corner of Magnus and High House Road and some changes in topography. And they advised staff that their proposal was to have the customer entrance facing in toward the parking lot. So to date, the applicant has not made any changes to the request with the preliminary development plan since the public hearing. In our analysis of the case against policies of the Imagine Cary Community Plan, staff finds that the work and shape chapters are most applicable. Development of a bank with a drive-through in an existing mixed-use project and within walking distance to additional mixed-use developments and residential areas supports work policies 2 and 3. The variety of residential, shopping, dining, and personal service adjacent to and in walking distance of the subject property enhances the locational appeal to businesses and workers, and it supports the needs of a company desiring to establish a presence in this area. The Future Growth Framework Map designates this area as commercial mixed-use center, and the intent here is to encourage and focus more intense development in strategic locations, avoiding strips of commercial development along major roadways, and at the same time, accommodating daily shopping and service needs of residents and workers. A bank with a drive-through facilitates this, and it aligns with the shape policies because it would provide an additional service option for residents within the adjacent developments, as well as those living in proximity and using the adjacent major streets. And the proposal also supports the shape policy regarding transitions because the subject property is within the Bradford and it's situated between some of the more intense uses within the overall mixed-use development and then the adjacent residential neighborhood, the Muirfield subdivision, which consists of detached dwellings at 2.5 units per acre. So the existing zoning really just limits the number of drive-through facilities within the Bradford. And it doesn't place any restrictions on where those facilities may be located in the overall development. This request is just to increase the number of those drive-through facilities. So based on our analysis, staff finds the request to be consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan as it supports the policies in the work, shape, and move chapters. In reviewing this request, the board may consider several factors, including the use and whether the development provides good transitions. The board may also wish to consider whether the proposed development meets the intent of the commercial mixed-use center designation in the Imagine Cary Community Plan. This concludes staff's presentation. Following comments from the applicant's representative, I will be available for your questions. So the applicant's representative is Mr. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Firm, and he's available to make his comments, and then we will both be available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon, Mr. Chair, and members of the board. It's a pleasure seeing everyone virtually this month. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant in this case. Between Ms. Grannon's presentation as well as the staff report, I think the basic information associated with the nature of this request is fairly straightforward. Not terribly complicated. I do want to highlight a couple of things, just really reiterating some points that Ms. Grannon touched on. And the first is that the bank use that is being requested as part of this case is a bank use that's already permitted. Really, it is the only thing before the only reason for the rezoning request is to permit a drive-through. And I want to talk about that a little bit, and I'll be brief, but as you can see with the slide that is on your screen, it is a drive-through, but it's not really a drive-through in what people would interpret to be the traditional sense of a drive-through. It's a drive-up ATM. So it's essentially a kiosk style, kind of you drive up, you conduct your banking transaction, there is no human interaction, and then you go about your day. And so it's not, when you hear drive-through, you typically think, fast food, driving up and you're dealing with somebody. And this is just, it's different. It's technically a drive-through based upon the way that the ordinance operates. But in reality, it's just a different animal than what you would typically characterize in terms of why limitations on drive-throughs exist in the first place. And so I just want to point that out because I do think it's an important point with respect to the drive-through, quote unquote, that's being requested as part of this case as it relates to other typical types of drive-throughs that you see in other cases. Also, this case started before the pandemic. So this was a desire that JP Morgan Chase Bank had to proceed with that predated the pandemic. However, the pandemic has reinforced the tremendous desire and need to provide their customers with contactless banking transaction options. There has never been a greater need to be able to provide banking users with the opportunity to drive up, conduct their transaction, and not have to interface with another human being. Which sounds terribly antisocial, but everybody understands the challenges that we've all been dealing with in terms of the pandemic and interaction with people. And so I would tell you that the pandemic has only highlighted why having a drive-up option is a true asset to having a bank use on this site. Again, a use that is already permitted. From a building orientation standpoint, we received the feedback from the council members who raised that issue, and we've corresponded with them as well as staff. As Ms. Grannon noted, and I appreciate the picture in the presentation because it is helpful and it does demonstrate that there is a significant retaining wall and a topo change there that makes the orientation maybe a little less important than it would be. I would also note that, as you can see on the slide in front of you, kind of where the parking is located on this building. So if you put the front door of the bank kind of facing High House Road, you would want to put a row of cars, a row of parking there just for the convenience of customers, and that would be permitted otherwise. The benefit of the layout that JP Morgan has come up with is that it eliminates the need to have parking between the building and High House Road. It's truly just a drive aisle that goes through there, and all of the parking is located to the east and to the north, kind of away from primary public view. And the last point I'll make on the building orientation is that the requirements of the community appearance manual with respect to how the front of that building needs to be dressed up, and I say front, the portion of the building that fronts on High House Road as well as Magnus Drive, those requirements are going to be the same regardless of whether the front door is technically facing the right of way. And so, and what that means is that the requirements to have a certain percentage of glass, certain percentage of masonry, all of those things still exist because those portions of the building face the public domain, and those requirements are going to be required regardless of where the front door is. And so, kind of taking all of those into consideration, we believe that this is the ideal orientation for a bank use on this site. And we believe, and that is, true regardless of whether this rezoning is approved, but we certainly believe, and my client believes, that having the drive-up ATM option will be a benefit to its customers and the community as a whole, especially with the pandemic experience that we've all gone through. And so with that, I'll end my comments a little shorter than I otherwise would in most cases, because I do think this is a fairly straightforward request. I'll open it up to any questions that you all may have, and respectfully request you all find that this case is consistent with the Cary Community Plan and make a recommendation to the council consistent therewith. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grandin and Mr. Barron. We'll go ahead and open this up to board questions, and we'll start with you, Mr. Hamilton.
I don't have any questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Samuel?
I have a question for the applicant, Mr. Barron. Is there any other banks with the drive-up ATM on the property already?
On the Bradford property?
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's a bank with a drive-through, and Ms. Grannon might be a better person to answer this question. I believe there's one other bank at the Bradford that has a true drive-through, but not a drive-up. That's my understanding, but maybe Ms. Grannon has accurate information on that.
I concur with Mr. Barron.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery?
No questions.
Mr. McFarland? We'll go again. Mr. McFarland, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff?
Pardon, I was on mute. Excuse me. For Ms. Grannon, I have a couple of questions. One is the existing zoning is for the mixed use overlay district, and there was a sketch plan for that development. Is there anything significantly lost in that in the translation going from that to the MXD? I mean, in terms of outside understanding that the constraint was the 3 drive-throughs or drive-ups, but is there anything else that's being lost in the translation?
That's an excellent question, and no. In fact, what we're actually gaining is a little bit more specificity today than what we would have had in 2007. In 2007, the mixed-use sketch plan was a little bit less detail, and some of our standards have increased and improved over the years. So really, it is the heart of this case is just to remove that one zoning condition that limited the number of drive-throughs.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. One other question is, Mr. Barron had referenced that I think he mentioned the UDO has standards for the facade, particularly for facing the street. And there was one thought that I had was just some uniformity, and could staff concur with that? That basically the existing ordinances are going to help. I guess, maintain there'll be a uniformity or some standards for that facade. In other words, it can't have a real pretty face facing the main door and then put vinyl siding. I always think of it, vinyl siding or metal wrap it around the other 3 sides.
That is correct. They have to comply with what's called the Community Appearance Manual, or the CAM.
Mm-hmm.
And that does require 75% masonry. Masonry is either brick, stone, cast concrete, or other high quality masonry material. It does not include stucco. It definitely does not include vinyl siding. They also need to meet certain requirements with the way the building is designed. They need to have a base, a body, and a cap. They have certain transparency requirements. And if they want to have any signage on the wall of the building that's facing Magnus or facing High House Road, then they either have to have a storefront or the appearance of a storefront with the way the windows are designed and vertical design elements. So they definitely have a high mark that they have to reach in order to be able to put signage on the building. But the CAM does take care of making sure that it's going to be high quality building material.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Great, thank you. And lastly, Mr. Crutchfield.
Just one question. Will this, once the bank goes in, will this fill the entire out parcel, or is there, just looking at it, doesn't seem like there's any room behind it, but I was just curious if this would fill that up, or would we be asked for something else at a later time?
If they want to make a modification to this, Mr. Barron, can you describe with this plan what's shown at the top of the parcel?
So the way that this site plan or development plan rather is being constructed, and the way the preliminary development plan is constructed, there's no intent for a future use on the north side of the lot. You know, if you look at the lot configuration, the way that it is set up, it is tough to make meaningful use out of that and still be able to use the bank. And honestly, the bank has a certain size that they need to meet anyways. And so there's just the good news is there was opportunity to put in additional parking that, you know, that the size of this parcel allowed that to happen, but there are no planned improvements in that area to the north of what you see.
Okay, so we would basically be approving the whole parcel or just the piece that the bank is going to sit on?
The entire parcel. Yes, sir.
Okay.
If they wanted to make a change to that, Mr. Crutchfield, they would have to come back in through another rezoning process. If they, you know, discovered another use that might be able to squeeze on there, they'd have to go through this process because the preliminary development plan is coupled with the rezoning request. The two go hand in hand.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right, thank you. And I have no further questions. So with that, I'll look for somebody to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. This is Dan McFarland. I move that the board find case number 19 REZ 31 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
This is
Mr.
Chuck
McFarland.
Montgomery. I'll second that motion.
All right. Mr. McFarland, if you want to go ahead and start us with discussion.
Thank you. You know, I think as staff laid out and the applicant's representative reiterated that this really comes down to that to the drive up situation. I think it's a good use for this parcel. I think of banks as being something of a passive or benign commercial development because they're typically not going to be open up late and they don't generate a lot of traffic per se. So I think it, in terms of a commercial use on that space, I think it's a good one.
Great. And Mr. Montgomery, anything you want to add?
I would agree with everything that he said.
Okay. So we will go ahead and go down the line with anyone who wants to add any discussion, starting with Mr. Hamilton.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Samuel,
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Mr. Crutchfield.
I just wanted to say that, you know, I agree with what Dan said, and I think this is a really good use. There's a brand new neighborhood directly behind this lot, and that's why I was asking about any future, because I agree that this is a pretty benign usage, and it's kind of seems to blend in with the new neighborhood without upsetting the folks there. So I'm going to be in support of it.
And I have nothing to add. So we'll go ahead and call this to a vote. Starting with Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
Ms. Samuel.
Aye.
Mr. Montgomery.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Crutchfield,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So that motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Ms. Grannon and Mr. Barron.
Thank you all. Have a great.
You too.
Welcome.
So the next item on our agenda is the Planning and Zoning Annual Report. This item summarizes all of the cases the Planning and Zoning Board heard and considered whether the proposal submitted was consistent with the Cary Community Plan. Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item, and then I'll open it up to board questions or comments. Ms. Grannon?
Thank you again, Chairman Eads. I'd first like to extend a very special thank you to all the board members for their dedication and commitment and really good, carefully thought out questions and their willingness to be adaptive. The annual report defines the board, that you're comprised of 9 members plus an alternate, 8 members within Cary's corporate limits and 1 in the ETJ. We've noted that the ETJ position is currently vacant, that you review proposals for rezoning requests, amendments to the comprehensive plan, amendments to Cary's land development ordinance, and proposed designation of historic districts. And you carry out the actions at the direction of the town council, and you're appointed by the town council. So in evaluating these requests, you're taking into consideration whether or not proposals are appropriate, harmonious with adjacent property, whether or not they address the needs of the town, and you're looking at the land development ordinance to also evaluate appropriateness, and most importantly, looking at the Imagine Cary Community Plan to help determine consistency with that plan. During this reporting period, you conducted 8 regular meetings and 1 work session. You reviewed 15 rezoning cases, 1 amendment to the Cary Community Plan, and 4 land development ordinance amendments. In March of 2020, the governor's state of emergency orders restricted public gatherings due to COVID-19, and therefore our meetings were canceled from March until June. We really missed you all. I know you missed us too. The board began to hold virtual board meetings starting in July of 2020. And these remote meetings were a challenge, but we were very grateful that you all paved the way with tremendous professionalism. You attended 2 training sessions prior to that, and a thank you to Julie and Katie for their patience as you worked through the technology, and a special thank you to Ryan Norris as she helped us figure out how to deal with this virtual format. So then the report also contains a detailed summary of each of the cases and then the results in terms of how you voted on these cases. And then we wrap the report up with the list of the board members and their terms and who's expiring. And we did note that we needed to make a correction for the term for Nicole Samuel, and we will change that to 2021. So this concludes staff's presentation, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. And just to remind everyone, we won't be voting on this item. However, I do want to provide an opportunity for anyone to provide feedback or ask any questions. So we'll go ahead and go down and do a roll call. If you have any comments, concerns, or feedback, please note it. And we'll start with Mr. Hamilton.
I have no questions, but just a quick comment that I'd like to thank staff for all their help behind the scenes. It's really been an eye-opener for me, that the amount of work that they have to take on for something like this, and I appreciate it.
Ain't that the truth? Ms. Samuel.
Yeah, I echo that. I really appreciate the town's preparation, due diligence, all of the information that's shared both before and during the meeting. I did have a question about new members. Will those new members just be announced over the course of the next month and they'll join then October's meeting?
What will happen is the council will must vote with the new members, and that's scheduled to happen at the end of this month. So we do have a couple of candidates that are that have applied to renew their board membership, but that will be determined by the town council, and then they'll be joining in October.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Montgomery?
No particular comments except to say that the staff always does a marvelous job. And I also have to say that the board members do a good job. And so I'd like to give some thanks to my fellow board members for the conscientious way in which they do their work.
It's definitely a team effort. But thank you for the comments. Mr. McFarland?
I don't have any comments, but I'd like to just echo what's been said. I really do appreciate the staff's efforts, their diligence, and their patience with all of us, and the transparency in which they and the entire town really conducts themselves. And so appreciate that, and I appreciate serving with everybody on this board. It's a great group of individuals who are very, very dedicated. Thank you.
And Mr. Crutchfield?
I'd just like to echo what everybody's already said. I agree, the staff is awesome, and this has been just a great team to work with, and really enjoy doing it.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you, staff, for doing the legwork and pulling this report together. You guys definitely make it easy. I can say that for sure.
It was a team effort there as well. Without a doubt, it was a team effort. So.
Well, great. So we have no closed session, but before I adjourn, I did want to just reach out to the staff and my fellow board members. My term is actually going to be expiring here shortly. So I just wanted to thank everyone for the last 6 years. Staff, you guys have been amazing. Done a big help, bring me up to speed, and allowing me, I guess, to continue to serve. And my fellow members, you know, you guys are really fun to work with, and you know, look forward to seeing what you guys do here in the future.
Chairman Eads, on behalf of the planning staff and the legal department, Lisa Glover's on the call as well. You have helped make our jobs easier with your professionalism and being approachable and just helping us be as productive as possible. And these meetings can get very intense at times, and you've just really helped us stay focused and run a very professional meeting. So we thank you so much for your service. We'd also like to say thank you very much to board members Hamilton and Hill, who their terms are expiring. We do understand that they've applied again for the board, so we'll know soon what council's decision is on that. But it's truly been a pleasure having you both as a board member and as the board chair, especially in these very unusual times.
Only ending it a lot differently than I would have thought, but it's been a ride.
Mrs. Glover or Jolie or Katie, would you like to say anything?
Deborah, you summed it up well. Thank you, Ryan, for your work. And thanks to all the board members for hanging with us on this unusual year. And it will continue. And someday, hopefully soon, we will see you all in person in a building. But thank you again for all your hard work this year.
I do want to say a special thank you, Chairman Eads. I wish we would have had more opportunities to work together. You did a great job. The transition, you know, from meetings in person to virtual, I mean, you really handled it like a trooper. And I was just so impressed with how it all went because of your professionalism. And I just appreciate that. Thank you.
Appreciate all you. You're a big part of that too, Julie. So definitely appreciate that as well.
I'd just like to echo my colleagues. It's been a pleasure to work with you, board chair, over the last year, and it's been an unprecedented challenge and exciting opportunity to transition to virtual meetings. It's been interesting. We've had to rethink all of our operations and interactions, and you made it easy to work with us. And thank you all to all the board.
Yes.
It's been a great year. Thank you.
Yes, to everybody.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add that this is Dan McFarland. Ryan, you leave really big shoes to fill. So it's been great. Served with you for 5 years now, and you've always been, yeah, it's been 5 years we've been on the board together, and you've always been incredibly well prepared, great questions, always very even-tempered, and you've been a great role model for everybody. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Dan.
I think you get to make the final motion.
I do. So traditionally, we don't like adjourning when our chair's out, but luckily with the virtual setup, I don't need to call that to a motion. So again, thank you everyone for this evening, and wishing you guys the best. I will go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.